welcome to Abilene, Texas.
And
Good day.
McMurry University.
And McMurry University. That is absolutely correct. We're the professors here. I'm Paul Fabrizio.
I'm Don Frazier.
And over there in the far corner, Scott the engineer making all this happen. So,
hello, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you, Scott?
I'm good.
Okay, so we need to introduce our guest today.
We have a special guest.
We do. And it is Dr. Jory Seacrest from McMurry University.
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you for having me.
So, Jory, welcome to the show,
Thank
Dr. Seacrest. And we thought we would spend today talking about what you do as a professor of sociology.
All right.
And
Okay.
I'm also interested in your journey
Okay.
to where you are now, because it's an interesting journey.
Yes. So, we want to start with, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
All right. Well, my name is Jori Sechrist, and I am actually originally from New Mexico. So
Hobbs, right?
Hobbs, New Mexico, yes. Beloved by some, detested by some too.
And where do you fall? Loved or
I fall
detested?
in the beloved most of the time.
Okay.
New Mexico is very near and dear to my heart. Hobbs has awesome people, and it's really ugly. Because it's
I would agree
an
with you
oil
on that.
town.
Yeah, it's on the Llano Estacado, which is not a pleasant name in and of itself.
Yes.
Not real scenic.
No, it isn't. Very flat, has gorgeous sunsets, so that there is some beauty to that. And I actually am a graduate of McMurry University. So I graduated in 2001, and
And what was your major?
my major was sociology, but it started out as biology and biomedical sciences.
Whoa,
So-
what happened?
Well, I decided that I wasn't a huge fan of chemistry. I didn't.
Sometimes that happens.
Yes, I didn't do poorly in it. I just didn't enjoy it. And in addition to a lot of biological sciences, you have to have chemistry to graduate in biomedical sciences. So I took an introduction to sociology class and decided that that is what I'd been doing pretty much my whole life. My mom and I would sit at a mall or an airport and watch people and talk about why they were doing the things that they were doing. And so sociology just kind of fit naturally with what I was interested in.
Let me just stop you right there then. So, sociology is the study of people?
People and groups and, pretty much human interactions.
So you're just a bunch of people watchers.
Yes.
Now, I
definitely.
say this because my office is in the sociology suite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for some reason, they tolerate me being there.
Oh,
And so they just,
We-
you don't
we
tolerate you don't tolerate me.
We-
we like political science.
And so basically what you guys do is just people watch.
Yeah. I think we have a lot of ties to political science and history and psychology. It's just a different lens, which I think is necessary. The reason that sociology really kind of grabbed me as a discipline were two things. One is kind of the scientific method for studying people. And the other was the ability to look from a very wide angle lens, kind of society as a whole, all the way down to those interpersonal interactions, and kind of making the connections across all of those. So looking at institutional level kinds of things, all the way down to how people and individual roles in those institutions operate. So.
Well, let me just start by asking then, scientific method.
It's got ology in the name.
It does.
So would you define that?
Sure.
And then how does that apply to the study of human beings?
Sure. So the scientific method, really positivism is one of the areas that... Positivism, looking at something as an objective reality. There is a side of sociology that has decided that there is an objective reality that can be observed. There's another side of sociology that looks at all things as subjective reality, and that knowing the subjective reality of the people within the natural environment is an important way to know things. So we've got both sides going on. So the scientific method is more along the lines of the natural sciences, where you have a theoretical framework that you look at what that theory says about social life. Then you develop a hypothesis. Then you gather observations in real life about what's going on, and you test that particular hypothesis.
I do that at the mall all the time.
Yeah.
We see people walking by.
Is that like mall bench walking or what?
That's exactly right. Yeah,
So-
they come into the club and you say, I wonder what her story is. Yeah, exactly right. I've seen you in work, so.
There you go. Then you go ask them.
And then you go ask them and say,
And you
I'm
find
being
out.
objective. Objectively speaking, I think Scott needs to go talk to her.
So there is the method of sitting
think
and
that's a real good
observing and
opening
counting the
line.
number of people that come into the mall and making determinations that there are more people who are, let's say, above 45 doing the mall walking
Yeah.
as opposed to
Oh,
people who are
okay.
younger. So there's that. Surveys tend to be one of the more common types of ways that we gather observations. We ask people about it, right? So you can
Amazing what you can learn by asking people stuff. Yeah.
exactly. And so then you've got the more subjective reality side, which isn't looking at theories and working on a hypothesis, but being in the moment, which is more closely associated with, I guess, more of the cultural, anthropological types of studies, and sociologists do those as well.
You're going to have to define that. Cultural,
Okay, so
anthropological.
anthropological, sorry. So going into a natural setting and living as someone in that natural
So
setting.
living as a mall walker? That's a
sociology.
goal.
I've tried it. I didn't like it. I
Yes.
kept going by the pretzel place, and it would
So
slow me
you
down.
learn the subjective reality of being a mall walker by becoming a mall walker and engaging in conversations with mall walkers.
In political
and
science,
doing
we
those
call
kinds
that
of
soak
things.
and poke.
Well,
Soak
all
and
right,
poke.
that's a
Okay.
good.
I don't like either one of these techniques. I like talking to dead people, man. That's what we do.
Yeah, I know.
Talking to
Yeah,
dead
just read dead
Yeah, they
people's
never
mail, man.
respond back to you.
Yeah,
That's
it's
why
like-
you
Well,
really like it.
So
Yeah.
sociologists do that too, the content analysis of documents that exist. So in my social research class, we talk about all of those different methods. And I have my students go and get the syllabi from classes to see what are the common elements of a syllabus and looking at the learning outcomes that are listed from each of the professors. What do professors think is an important skill or information that you need to learn from the class? And so those are some of the types of things that tell us about then the education process and the institution of higher ed.
Now, we started this with the discussion of the scientific method.
Mm-hmm.
And you said a scientific method always starts with,
Not always.
not always,
Well-
but it has a hypothesis, a theory.
It has theory and observation are the two what I call pillars of scientific knowledge. To me, in the natural sciences, it's very linear. You start with you start with a theory, you then move to a hypothesis. Then you gather observations and you test that hypothesis and draw your conclusions. In sociology, I like to picture it as more of a wheel, and you can come in multiple places in the wheel, in the process of moving. So you have the observations and you have the theory, but sometimes you start with just the observations. You sit there and look at the mall walkers, and then you develop a theory from that then you can look at testing your hypothesis. Some people start from the theory and move in the other direction.
Can you give us an example of a theory about mall walkers?
Cheap enchiladas
Theory
at El
about-
Phoenix.
Or is it-
Do I
or is it
have
a-
to
just
use
saying.
small walkers?
Well, you brought it up
I
at the beginning.
know.
No, use something else.
What's the theory of when mom's going to go off on her kids? Out of everybody else?
That
Who
one
gets
I know
spanked
more
by
about.
Okay,
That's
there you
right.
go.
Who gets spanked with a shoe? That's what I want to know.
So in my journey of sociology, I have gotten to the point where I am in the area of studying family and family relations. And in graduate school, I studied parental favoritism.
Where did you go?
I went to Purdue University for
Okay.
my master's and my PhD.
And you went
Okay.
straight from McMurry
I
to
went
Purdue.
straight from McMurry to Purdue.
From
yes.
being an Indian to a Boilermaker.
That's right.
Wow. And now
Boiler up.
I was going to ask, boiler up?
Pull her up. I've never heard that.
I've heard that in South Louisiana.
Come on.
Okay. So we've got about a minute and a half left, so I interrupted you.
That's
Please.
okay. So, a theory about parental favoritism is we can go all the way back to Durkheim, which is one of the original sociologists, and
Emile Durkheim, right?
Emile Durkheim, yes, a French sociologist.
Yes.
And we can go back to that and look at that there are each person in the family might have a particular function for what or their purpose in the family.
Yeah,
and
I wish you'd study my family. I'm the youngest of 10 kids, man. We have our own battalion.
Yep.
Are you from a large family too?
I'm the third oldest of 10 kids.
Mm-hmm.
So there's something about 10 kids and doing podcasting.
Wow. Well, I have one sister, so that doesn't clearly I was not created for this.
Okay, what we're going to do, we have to stop, unfortunately.
All right.
And we have to take a break. When we come back, we want to learn more about parental favoritism.
All right.
Okay, in a family of 10.
Yeah, because I know who the favorite was in my family.
It was me in my family.
It was certainly not me.
It wasn't little Donnie Strawberry.
Yeah.
And were you the favorite in your family of 2?
We'll talk about that in a minute.
Bear Leader Tours. Where will Bear Leader Tours take you? Everywhere. Paris, Bruges, Trier, battlefields, Pearl Harbor, Pacific beaches, New Orleans. Join the adventure. www.mcwhinney.org.
This portion of the show is reserved for advertisements. If you are interested in filling this portion with ads for your business, please call 325-793-4686 or email director@tfhcc.com. This portion of the show is reserved for advertisements. If you are interested in filling this portion with ads for your business, please call 325-793-4686 or email director@tfhcc.com. This portion of the show is reserved for advertisements. If you are interested in filling this portion with ads for your business, please call 325-793-4686 or email director@tfhcc.com. This portion of the show is reserved for advertisements. If you are interested in filling this portion with ads for your business, please call 325-793-4686 or email director@tfhcc.com. This portion of the show is reserved for advertisements. If you are interested in filling this portion with ads for your business, please call 325-793-4686 or email director@tfhcc.com.
And we're back, and this is Paul Fabrizio.
I'm Don Frazier, and you're listening to the Professor's Podcast, brought to you from McMurry University. Our guest today...
But we do need to say one thing. Abilene, Texas, where the
McMurry
temperature is like 102 outside.
It's summertime in Texas.
It's summertime.
You know, we don't have to tell everybody where McMurry University is because they already know.
Okay.
I mean, if you say Notre Dame, you don't have to say Notre Dame in South Bend, Indiana.
That's true, but I came from the University of Southern California. So they always said it in their name, Southern California.
Well,
and there is a McMurry University spelled
in
differently
Illinois.
in Illinois.
Yeah.
So if my friends from Purdue are watching, we do have to say that.
Yeah, and I was just reading about...
I think we transcend zip code. I'm just saying.
Okay, but anyway... Dr. Jory Seacrest is our guest
you cut
today.
me off, but
I'm sorry, I did cut you off. I apologize. And that's got the engineer over there in the corner having a good time, I guess.
He hates it when Daddy and Daddy fight. It's because you were Mom's favorite, clearly. Oh, sorry.
She's going to do a study if y'all don't do it.
So, Dr. Seacrest, you were talking about family favorites.
Yes.
Parental favorites.
Parental
and that
favoritism.
this is what got you interested in
Well,
research, or
Actually,
help me out.
that is a long journey.
Okay.
So when I was at McMurry, I helped Dr. Robert Wallace do one of his studies. So that was my internship in the sociology department. And I went to graduate school not thinking that I was going to get really excited about research. I wanted to come back to teach. And so I went to Purdue, and I was going to study the sociology of religion. But Purdue lost one of the major scholars in the sociology of religion the year that I got there. And so I was kind of searching for a place because there wasn't a whole lot going on in the sociology of religion in that department at that time. And so I fell in with a couple of incredible mentors while at Purdue. One of them was Ken Ferraro, and he studied gerontology. And a
That's
couple,
old people.
That is old people.
Like me.
Yes.
Gerontology.
And then a couple of years later, Jill Suter came from LSU up to Purdue, and she studied within family differences and had a major study, 550 mothers who were over the age of 65, and approximately 700 of their children were interviewed in this first wave. And I was able to be a graduate assistant on that project and wrote a lot about parental favoritism, primarily mothers, because there weren't as many fathers who were interviewed for that. But I learned in that process loads about, it was a mixed methods, which means she used both a survey and open-ended questions on the survey that allowed people to really kind of explore or discuss more in depth. It wasn't just all A, B, or C, and you have to answer one of those. So in that study, she asked specifically mothers, is there a specific child in your family that you feel most emotionally close to?
Why do you like Susie better than Jill?
So she just went out there and asked
Oh,
that
yeah.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One has to clean up after everybody, and the other three get to go to the ball.
Yep.
Did anybody slap the interviewer?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty
Two-thirds of mothers actually named someone.
You're kidding me.
Nope.
Really?
Yes. And the other questions were, do you have a person that you would, or a child that you would prefer to take care of you if you were ill or disabled?
Oh,
And 75% of the mothers said yes.
of course.
And so they,
Don't you have the same feeling about
Well,
your kids?
no, my kids both said, we're not taking care of you. So, I mean,
Oh, okay.
we're going to put you on the ice floe and shove you out to sea.
so mothers said that. And then the follow-up was, why? So the mothers got to explain why that particular child was the most emotionally close, or why they would prefer that child to take care of them. So
I'm just curious, just thinking about this. I guess our thinking would be that mothers don't play favorites, but our reality from our lived experience is that mothers do play
Certainly.
favorites.
and they do. So they're definite, and they're willing to tell us that too.
What about
so,
fathers? Do they play favorites?
Different research.
So
It's family research.
True.
Dads are part of it. I'm feeling a little bit of bias here.
there is bias in almost all of the family literature, whether it's parental favoritism or any other type. The focus tends to be any type of parent-child relationships. The focus tends to be on mother-child relationships.
Why?
Why do you think? I think it's because we have traditionally separated the role of parent and the role of breadwinner, and parents have traditionally been mothers.
What
and
a
the breadwinner
1950s
has-
view, man.
It comes directly from the 1950s.
I'm feeling a little triggered here.
I personally view that as a problem in gender equity, that we don't think of fathers as parents. They babysit their kids. And I've heard that over and over. When
Yikes.
Tim and I first had our children, I would be going somewhere and someone would say, "Oh, is Tim babysitting?" And I'm like, "No, he's parenting. He's a father." That's
Wow.
what they do.
No.
But anyway,
when
we digress.
you were involved in this research, did these questions about fathers come up in
So-
the research design?
There were some fathers who were interviewed. Not as many agreed to be interviewed in the process. So there wasn't, it was, the mothers were the target, and then they were asked if their spouses would be willing to be interviewed, and not as many of them said yes. So we just didn't have enough power really to be looking at fathers. I believe Jill Suter has done a little bit more with fathers, but it's still limited because of the sample.
I mean, traditionally, the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world, as they say. But
Yes.
Well-
have you heard that?
Yes, I have.
And it's usually mothers rocking the cradle. At least that's by implication.
Right now.
But increasingly, I mean, there's also an argument for it's the dads that teach wisdom, character, and things like that. So, I mean, dads have a role to play.
So you did this research, and what did you learn from this research?
A lot.
Okay.
So there were mothers who were interviewed, and then their adult children were interviewed as well. And the adult children were asked,
What a conversation. Yeah.
do you think that your mother has a particular child to whom they're most emotionally close?
Were the mothers and the children in the room together at the same time interviewed,
No.
or was it all
was
separate?
separate. Mhm.
Okay, so
It was
therefore
all
you could be
separate.
free with what you said.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, definitely.
And it was
so,
I mean, you didn't say, well, we talked to your kids.
Oh,
this is
gosh,
what
no.
they said. Yeah.
No,
no.
your mother said.
But later in the research, right, when everything's de-identified and the families aren't necessarily connected and don't know who's who, we went back and we looked, and kids don't actually know. They know that mom has a favorite, but they're not always correct in terms of who the favorite was.
Oh, this is almost like the match game or like the newlywed game. You know, what's his age? What's
Yep.
his age?
Yep. So we have
Interesting.
that
I like its game
dynamic
show.
going on.
This would be a great game show.
Yeah. So all of this is really interesting information. The mothers do have preferences. Gender plays a role. You probably can guess who that would be.
Girls
yes.
are usually the favorite of the mommy.
And then birth order plays a role.
So the older the child,
The youngest.
is-
tends to be more emotionally close.
really?
But it
Because,
all
wait, you're the youngest of 10, Don.
Swing and a miss.
And with that, we're going to have to take a break in
Well,
just a second. So
yeah.
you're actually the favorite then.
but it all comes down to similarity.
Yeah, I can see that.
Those who are closest to their moms are most similar.
We'll be right back.
When you support McMurry History Education Group, you also support the many young workers who operate and maintain the company's digital operations. These are dedicated university students who handle many things such as filming, recording, and editing content for McMurry, as well as cultivate the layout and structure of McMurry's various websites, including its associated channel on YouTube. We are a nonprofit organization that exists from donations from interested persons and history enthusiasts alike. Donations enable our students to obtain a higher education, job training, and career bolstering skills. If you would like to donate, please visit us at www.mcwinnie.org and click on our About Us tab to learn more.
This portion of the show is reserved for advertisements. If you are interested in filling this portion with ads for your business, please call 325-793-4686 or email director@tfhcc.com. This portion of the show is reserved for advertisements. If you are interested in filling this portion with ads for your business, please call 325-793-4686 or email director@tfhcc.com. This portion of the show is reserved for advertisements. If you are interested in filling this portion with ads for your business, please call 325-793-4686 or email director@tfhcc.com. This portion of the show is reserved for advertisements. If you are interested in filling this portion with ads for your business, please call 325-793-4686 or email director@tfhcc.com.
And we're back again. This is the professors here.
From McMurry University in Abilene, Texas.
That's right. I'm Paul Fabrizio.
I'm Don Frazier.
And our guest is Dr. Jory Seacrest, Professor of Sociology, McMurry University. And we're learning all about family, I guess what would be the right word? Dynamics, order, dysfunction?
Favoritism?
The right thing?
The Roseanne Show? No, that's something else. But I think it's interesting. We were talking about me being the youngest.
Mm-hmm.
And me, kind of being all booty hurt because I wasn't the favorite. But I think it's interesting. What is it? A son is a son until he takes a wife.
Yes.
A daughter is a daughter all of her life. And apparently your research bears this out.
I think so. I think there's a lot to be said for mothers and daughters having greater similarity. So when daughters get married, they are able to have a different type of relationship with their mother because of that similar status. Then when they have children of their own, there's greater similarity because of that particular status. And then there's the personality characteristics that have that similarity that comes about. So those are some of the things in the qualitative, open-ended question about why do mothers have these favorites. Those similarities started coming out. So
my girls all share shoes.
Mm-hmm.
So there's going to be something.
Because
they all wear size 7s or whatever size they wear.
Yep, but
I don't buy their shoes. Well, I buy their shoes, but I don't buy
their shoes.
Totally different in my family because my sister is my father made over completely.
Oh, sure.
So I was going to say.
Is she the favorite?
Yep.
I've never thought about it that way.
Is she your dad's favorite?
Well, she probably was my dad's favorite.
Yeah.
My dad's passed on,
Yeah.
but she probably was. I guess I've never really thought back about that.
I've met her and I've met you.
Yeah.
Just saying.
I think there's something to that. That background.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Please.
There's something to that in my family. My mom was most close to my sister, at least growing up.
Is she older than you?
My sister is older. She's also a McMurry graduate.
Yes,
by
I
the
know
way.
her as well.
So she and my mom are more similar, and my dad and I were more similar. So in terms of the emotional closeness, I would say that there was some of that. But then we throw in spouses, and that's something that after doing this research with Dr. Suter, I became really interested in how status transitions affect the favoritism in families.
Oh,
so,
I imagine that's a big factor.
That actually is something that hasn't been studied. So there's a whole lot of research going on at the younger levels. So in childhood, do your parents play favorites? Do they give more resources to one child or another? And then there's, it's actually Jill Suter and Carl Pillemer have collaborated on this within family differences in later life. So parents who are 65 and over and their adult children. But there's not a whole lot going on in young adulthood where all of those status transitions are taking place. And so going to college, getting married, having kids, and whether or not those status transitions and how they affect favoritism as you move forward. So things like, for instance, in my family, my sister got married and moved to Illinois. And I was in Indiana, but then my husband and I came back here. And so right now, our relationship is probably closer in proximity, but also we could spend more time with my mom. And
FaceTime is important.
There are different things that can affect those relationships. So those are some of the things that I started thinking about as I did these studies. And one of the things that I researched later was looking at, is there something to how getting married and the relationship that your spouse, if you're an adult child, how does your spouse's relationship with your parents affect your relationship with them?
greatly and profoundly.
Yes.
I will forget. You know, my mother, being from a large family, she actually told a woman that was marrying into the family that, you know, your kids are your kids forever. In-laws come and go.
Oh.
Kind of made for a hot LZ on that landing.
I bet so.
Yeah, but that, I would say, if you have a spouse that your mother or your dad or your parental units favor over other spouses, that all of a sudden you get a couple of extra points. Now, thank goodness we don't have the law of primogeniture, you know, where all of a sudden heirship and other things enter into all this. You know, we can go ahead and have these bare knuckle fights in American families, but man, you know, in some places in the world, this is kind of a much bigger deal.
Yeah.
Now, when you did this original research, the question was asked of the mother. Was it asked, who is your favorite at that time or when they were younger?
So there was a
good
question at that time. Who is your
favorite?
It's not asked as who is your favorite. It's asked, do you have someone that you're most emotionally close to?
Okay.
And then there was the other one that was asked about if you have a child that you prefer to give you care when you're ill or disabled.
Right. Two totally different kinds of questions.
Yes.
Yeah,
and-
one involves changing diapers, adult diapers.
Yes, and actually, I wasn't a part of that initial interview process. I got to work with those data. So those data were a part of my dissertation. I looked at whole families. Every person, the mother and all of her children, were interviewed in the data that I used, and I looked at how each person reported kind of the closeness within the family. And I was trying to see if agreement across the family improved outcomes for parents and children. But what I found was that most families tend to report high levels of closeness. All the people tend to, and there's very little disagreement about that. So,
do you believe them? I mean, I hate to ask that question.
No.
But
so this is the thing: is
cynical.
this is what we find is that parents report high levels of closeness to their children, all children, and children report high levels of closeness to their parents, but it's always lower than what the parents report is. So the subsequent generations always have a slightly less positive view of their relationship. So if you're just asking the question on a scale from 1 to 7, where 1 is not close at all and 7 is extremely close, you know, how close are you to your parent? Most people are going to say 5, 6, or 7. Parents tend to go 6 or 7. Children tend to go more like 5 or 6, but it's all still really high on the scale.
Yeah.
And didn't you find that the children often were wrong in identifying who was the favorite?
So if you ask specifically about favorites, then we get to see the more within family differentiation that's going on. So that first question is just global closeness, how close are you? And so there's less differentiation that we see, but when you ask targeted, who's your favorite kid, then we do see that parents are doing that. And yes, then children don't necessarily know who. So what it turns out is that moms are pretty good at hiding who it is. Kids can kind of identify. But if I talk to my kids, each one of them says that the other one is my favorite, right? But I have a different relationship with both of them. So we're emotionally close, but on completely different ways.
So you're not willing to stand here and tell us who your
I
favorite
knew you were going to
is?
do that. I knew you were going to say, so, Jory, who's your favorite kid? Yeah.
And we don't worry about the
The
camera.
whole
Don't worry
Sophie's
about
Choice
being
thing.
anywhere.
So
You're sick.
I will tell you my theory on this
Okay.
because I haven't tested it, but I think, so you know, with children, they're different,
Yes.
Yes.
right? And so I have similarities with both of my children, but they're in completely different areas. My older child is a brainiac. She's very intellectual, always has been. So we connect on a very intellectual level. My younger daughter is an athlete. She is much more kind of, her emotions are worn outside so you can tell if she's mad or sad or whatever. And so we connect in that way. And so I think that there's something to, there is within family differentiation. Part of it, though, has to do with the differences in your children. So there are some similarities that if you're more similar to one of your parents, then you're likely to have a more emotionally close connection to them.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean,
no, that's how it works in my family.
certainly in my family as well. I mean, I've got one daughter that's a lot more like her mother, another daughter that's a lot more like me.
Yeah, and my wife is more like my son, and I am more like my daughter, just in terms of how we think and how we approach things.
I think those connections are interesting to look at. And now we're going to kind of get into more psychological. Those personality characteristics come into play. So you got personality, and then you got the status, which is where those come out more. So my older daughter is probably going to achieve a higher education. So she's probably going to go to graduate school, maybe get her PhD. That's her plan anyway.
And that could change your relationship.
And
with
that,
her.
Exactly.
Yeah, what if she
Exactly.
published an article that refuted her research?
Yeah.
You're out of the will.
Yeah, you're out of the will. Okay, we've got 10 seconds left. So when we come back, it'll be our last segment. I'm not sure what we're going to say, but I can't wait till we get there. We'll be back.
Welcome to State House Press, a nonprofit publisher of quality books. State House Press and the McMurry Foundation Press are part of the Texas A&M University Press Consortium, which handles retail distribution for several small but distinguished publishers. Our entire list of offerings, with pictures, summaries, prices, and easy online ordering, is available in our section of the consortium website. State House Press is proud of its reputation for high standards of scholarship and readability. In addition to this, we at State House Press have recruited the talents of individuals such as Phil Collins on his book, The Alamo and Beyond. We release not only texana by contemporary authors, but reprints of classic accounts of Texas life and history otherwise inaccessible to the public. Our book list also incorporates the publications of the McMurry Foundation Press, specializing in the history of the Old South and the Civil War. We strive with our titles to make history accessible to as many readers as possible. To accomplish this task, we have recruited some of America's leading historians, as well as bright new scholars. We believe firmly in narrative history, in telling a good story, and in telling it well, without losing sight of the people who've made history and the events that changed a nation.
For questions or business inquiries, please visit the Texas Book Consortium at www.tamupress.com.
This portion of the show is reserved for advertisements. If you are interested in filling this portion with ads for your business, please call 325-793-4686 or email director@tfhcc.com. This portion of the show is reserved for advertisements. If you are interested in filling this portion with ads for your business, please call 325-793-4686 or email director@tfhcc.com. This portion of the show is reserved for advertisements. If you are interested in filling this portion with ads for your business, please call 325-793-4686 or email director@tfhcc.com.
And we're back. And this is Paul Fabrizio.
I'm Don Frazier.
I just have to say it differently every time.
Well, you did, and you sounded like an adolescent rooster. And we're back! It's like, wow.
I thought he was overly excited about that.
Say, you like this family research, do you? Now you know why your mom was, so close to you or whatever.
Well, my impression of my mom probably is different than her impression of me.
Oh, I guarantee you.
That's a possibility.
That's
So
very
did the case
possible.
with me.
She always said that every one of us were her favorites.
Well, sure. Did your mother have a nickname for you?
No.
You knew that you were off the charts with my mom when she said, "You're ugly, ugly, ugly." So if you got the three uglies, man, you were off the chart.
You were special.
And then sometimes you'd get the idiot. So if you got the ugly, ugly, ugly idiot, boy, that was like the whole package there.
Yeah, that was. See, I go by my middle name. If I was ever called by my first name, I knew I was in.
Now, was it your dad calling it or your mom
Oh
calling it?
no, that'd be my mom hollering Jason across through. I didn't have to mess with my dad much.
See?
And
And he wouldn't have participated in the study
study
at all, yeah. So.
My dad boxed all the way through high school and through the Navy. I knew not to mess with him.
Okay, our guest is Jory Seacrest, Dr. Jory Seacrest from McMurry University's Sociology Department. And this has been a fascinating experience as we learned about families. Don from history, me from political science, but both of us from families of 10, and all of a sudden you're forcing us to re-examine our whole family dynamics.
Well, our personal family dynamics.
Yeah,
Reading
okay.
dead people's mail, as I do, you can see these dynamics throughout history.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Especially if you have letters that span several different members of a family. And you can see the difference in the communications because, it's not done on social media. It's not done text message that you can audit. Yeah. And these guys are, maybe living hundreds, if not thousands of miles apart from each other. So it's interesting to see what the parent says to this one as opposed to what the parent says to this one.
Okay. And Jory, you were going to say something.
Well, you can look at the Bible, and there's a whole bunch of different references to favoritism in the family.
Jacob and Esau.
All throughout. You start with Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel.
Yeah.
So
there were issues in that family.
Right. So this is something that I think it resonates with everybody.
Yeah,
and you can see that. Look at the media and television shows that are so popular. You mentioned Roseanne. Well, there was a whole lot of sibling and parental favoritism that was in that. Everybody Loves Raymond is all about parental favoritism. So it is something that resonates with people because it's real.
It's a real thing.
It is.
So we were talking about your journey back to the land of the Warhawks.
Yes.
So it was Purdue, and you mentioned that you went there and got into research, and you didn't necessarily think you were going the research route. So pick up the story then.
Okay. So this is another interesting thing why we get into family dynamics here. I was very interested in gerontology, and I said I worked a little bit with Ken Ferrara, who studied health and aging. And so my master's work was actually on Mexican-American health and whether or not going to church reduced hypertension in elderly Mexican-Americans. And yes,
Really?
it does. Yes.
Really?
Seriously?
It does, yes.
Going to your church.
We started with a theory about stress and the ability of religion to kind of play a role in social support and also positive health behaviors and lowering stress.
So going to church is good for you.
So
especially if you're an
Mexican American. That's right.
And does it matter the denomination?
No.
Is there a Baptist benefit?
All I looked at was how often the attendance happened.
Okay.
So
the more you went, the better you were?
Yeah. So longitudinally, if you went to church regularly, then it had a tendency. And there's a lot of research out there that demonstrates some of this. So what the mechanism is, whether it's that you get social support, that you have people who care about you and want to help you, or if there's, an element to it's a time for reflection and you calm down and there's less stress, all of that can play into why church can help. So other social activities do a similar thing. But that's when I kind of got really interested in doing research. And so I continued this, and I've always kind of had an interest in, interesting questions and being able to really answer those questions firsthand as opposed to just taking someone's word for it.
Sure.
So that's what interested me about sociology and that scientific method, that you can go out and you can ask people or you can observe people and actually find that information. And so at Purdue, I started thinking, well, maybe I do want to go to a research institution.
And at research institution, we need to say, you mostly do research.
Yes.
You do a little bit of teaching, but it's mostly about your research.
Yes. And so I actually had 2 tracks in graduate school. I was very interested in teaching, but I was also very interested in research. So for the majority of the time that I was there, I had a teaching assistantship and I had a graduate research assistantship. So I was doing both. I actually, in one of my graduate research assistantships, I was the managing editor for teaching sociology. So it was kind of combining both of those together.
Yeah.
Yes. So along that path, my interviews tended to be, when I graduated and I was on the job market, tended to be research, primarily research institutions. In fact, I didn't apply to a single teaching institution at all when I first went on the job market. And there's a little caveat here. I went on the job market in 2008. I don't know if you recall what 2008 looked like.
Bad time.
And I've got to tell you, we have less than 2 minutes,
Yes.
unfortunately.
So quickly, 2008 was not a good year to go on the job market. Neither was 2009.
Or
2010 really wasn't either.
2017.
I went on interviews every year, but luckily I had a postdoc with Dr. Suter, and I was continuing to work on this study. There was a second wave that was funded, and so we were able to re-interview the mothers and their children. And so I finally ended up at the University of Texas Pan American in Edinburgh, Texas, which is very down south for those people who are listening or watching.
Mexico, yeah.
It is very near
Goes
Mexico.
Far south in Texas as you can go.
And it was a great experience, and I really enjoyed being there. I taught 3 classes a semester and also had a lot of expectation for doing research. And the balance there was very hard for me to kind of get control over.
Sure.
So there was an expectation for excellence in teaching, expectation for research. And I discovered that I loved research, but I wanted to incorporate more teaching in that. And so McMurry ended up being the perfect place for me.
And you came to McMurry in what year?
I came to McMurry in, that would have been 2014.
In 2014. Mm-hmm. And so here you teach 4 classes?
Yes.
And still do research?
Yes.
On families?
All over the place now because I do what my students are interested in as well.
Very good. We've got to stop,
We got to
unfortunately.
stop. Appreciate you coming by, Jory.
Absolutely. It was great.
And class dismissed.